there's a few things that I want you to master prior to beginning your mobility program. A few things that if you do master will benefit you and will make you get the most out of the program that it has to offer. One of these things I want you to master is your breath work. You'll see as you begin the program and start clicking on the videos and seeing what the program has to offer, that there's a pattern that every single mobility day begins with breath work, and there's a reason for it. Our intention with the breath work is to put ourselves into our parasympathetic state. So our central nervous system breaks into our autonomic nervous system, which has two umbrellas under it. We have our parasympathetic state, which is our rest and recovery state, and we have our sympathetic state, which is where all the stressors and all the bad stimuli exist. I want to get you out of that bad stressor area in our sympathetic state and pull you into our parasympathetic state. Once we've developed the right breath work and can do diaphragmatic breathing or expansion of the belly and abdominal cavity, an entire expansion of the rib cage, then we can move into our parasympathetic state. Within that state, we can offer more joint range of motion, we can decrease cortisol levels, and we can have better hormonal responses. We decrease our heart rate, and our overall life health improves. So always beginning with our breath work. Our breath work is also important not only for respiration, but for stability. If we can master abdominal tension with the exhalation, we can better protect our spine when doing movement, especially when the movement is loaded. So you'll see that I've coached you with the video in the program about expansion of the abdominal cavity and the rib cage. When you're inhaling, you should be inhaling through your nose, and there should be full expansion, 360 degrees all the way around your rib cage. As you breathe out, you'll see that my ribs come down to my pelvis, and I almost do an abdominal crunch. My inhale will always be about 5 seconds, and my exhalation will always be longer, about 8 to 10 seconds. Really trying to engage the core and bring your ribs down to your pelvis and close that zone of apposition, which is a PRI term, from your rib cage down to your pelvis, trying to close this angle. So, with proper breath work and diaphragmatic breathing, we get optimal respiration mechanics and we get stability. So that's why it's important. So, to begin, I want to show you an example of what I mean. So on my back, you'll see I've already posted a video with this. You're going to go knees bent. If you've had a history of low back pain, or you feel like you're feeling a stretch in your back, that's something I don't want. So you may want to elevate your heels on a couch or on a table. That way you can flatten out your back. You also may want to bolster yourself with a pillow behind your head if you find that you're in cervical extension. Okay? So all we're going to do here is an example of diaphragmatic breathing. My breath would be in through my nose, big belly, out through my mouth, ribs down to my pelvis. So as you notice, with my breath in, I have a big belly and big abdominal expansion. And with my breath out, my ribs come down to my pelvis. This might take a few reps. It may take more than 12 reps, which I've had prescribed for you in the program. Feel free to do more breaths. Breathing will never make you worse. I just want you to stay away from the traditional chest breathing, which a lot of us get into. Chest breathing is going to light up all the muscles in your cervical area that are your secondary breathing muscles. We want your diaphragm to be your primary breathing muscle, and you want all these muscles up here to be your secondary. So you'll find that if you are a chest breather, you probably have some tone up in your neck that shouldn't be there. And with the breath work and the optimal breathing patterns, you'll find that that tone begins to dissipate. So always beginning with our breath work, that is the number one thing I want you to master prior to doing any movement. Another thing I want you to master prior to beginning the mobility course is tensioning. If you can tension and create self-imposed force, you can create greater trauma to your body that your brain will recognize and develop through, and then that stress stimuli will translate to better mobility gains. Or you can choose to be more passive about things and not be active about your mobility drills, and you won't get many gains at all. What happens when we create force is our brain recognizes the stimulus, and so don't our cells. Our cells adapt to force. The more force you can create while doing your mobility work, the more your brain will remember those patterns, and the more mobile you will become. Paired with the breath work, you're going to train your nervous system to feel safe in those newly acquired ranges of motion. So mastering tension is very important. And here's an example of what I mean. I can sit down here and I can do a shoulder circle. Not much is probably going to happen or change, because my force production isn't that high and my amplitude and the stimulus isn't that great of a stressor. I could do the same exact movement, standing up, trying to drive through the floor, squeeze my butt, bring my ribs down to my pelvis, make a fist with my opposite arm, and I can pretend the air is super thick and dense, nice and slow, move all around. You get the point. The more force I create, the more feedback my brain's going to get, and the more change is going to occur. Because there's more trauma happening, and our body responds to trauma, just like weightlifting. Mobility is no different than weightlifting, but we often treat it differently. Just like if I were to do a bicep curl with about 5 pounds and I did 10 reps, it probably wouldn't do much for my bicep. If I took a 25-pound dumbbell or a 30-pound dumbbell and I did the same movement for the same amount of reps, it probably would have produced more trauma to the muscle tissue, and my brain would recognize it as an external stimulus, and there would be some change that resulted. Now that we're talking about trauma, let's talk about good trauma and bad trauma. Good trauma is exactly what I just went through. Being able to create a safe stimulus that your brain recognizes so that it can create a change. This change for this program being mobility. A bad trauma would be you moving through pain. So you'll see through the program I have you doing certain mobility circuits where you're doing circles with your cervical spine, your shoulder, bunch of stuff you'll see. There's good trauma and there's bad trauma. The good trauma would be you moving through the entire range of motion with a lot of tension, trying to challenge your end range. Bad trauma would be you moving into painful ranges of motion that you don't have access to, or ranges of motion that you do have access to that also inflict pain. At no point during this program should you feel pain. If you actually do feel pain, you should draw a smaller circle or try and shorten the mobility work that you're trying to do. So for example, if I do a shoulder circle with a lot of tension, pretend, and I feel pain here at this point, I'm going to stop before I get to that pain state, and I'm going to draw a smaller circle. This might be my circle, as long as it's pain-free. If you still feel pain doing something, just stay away from it. This is a generic program meant for healthier people, so if you find that there's something that's inflicting pain, just skip the movement or draw a smaller circle. If you move into the pain response, you're just going to strengthen that circuit and that pain response, which is not what we want. So, back to tensioning, it's very important for your brain to recognize that there's a stress stimulus happening so that it can create change. Over time and over doing repetitive movements and all the stuff that I've shown you in the videos, you'll find that change will occur. The more you put into it and the more effort you put into the system, the more you'll get out of it. And that's what it breaks down to. Which brings us to intent. So, the last thing I want you to do is master intent. If you can master intent, you'll master everything else above and below the system. So after our breath work and our tensioning, I want you to understand what we're trying to do with every single joint and what we're trying to achieve. So, with intent comes consciousness. I want you to be actively paying attention to what you're doing and what your body is feeling. No one else can feel your body for you and what your body's responding to and what your body's feeling in that moment or time. So say we're trying to do tibial rotations here, for example. I don't want you looking around the room, checking out someone down on the other side of the gym while doing your rotations. I also don't want you thinking about laundry while you're doing your rotations. Just like when you're reading a book and you're thinking about other things, you might be going through the motions of doing the reading, but your brain doesn't remember it because you're not present. With this system, it's important that you're present and you're paying attention to your joints, your breath work, and your tensioning. Otherwise, you're not going to get much out of it. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately. You have to work hard for good things, and good things take time, and joint health is no different than that. So always mastering breath work, tensioning, and your intent and attention will give you the most optimal results for this program.